Hello everyone, good evening or good day depending where you're watching from. Welcome to another live lesson. Today we're going to continue with the Bal Islam article, The Peace in the World, and Peace in the World article. And as you know, we started this last week and we're going to carry on with it until we finish it like the other ones. It's a continuation from the first article. We started with Bal Islam, the Matan Torah article. After that we did Arvut, peace now, peace in the world. So this article is especially relevant for our time now in the 21st century, since the world is now showing us that we're one integral creation where everything is actually dependent on everything else. So we're so interconnected and intertwined that all of humanity, all the countries, all the nations, every one of us, including nature itself with the still, vegetative and animate levels, they're all interconnected. And there's nowhere really for us to segregate ourselves as humans and say, well, we're higher than all the other levels in nature and we're smarter and we can do things our way. We just can't say that simply because also this revelation of the coronavirus is showing us that the whole world is really under the control and domination of nature. So as the students of wisdom of Kabbalah, we understand that the whole system of creation is integrated, and we as humanity are also a part of that integration, and therefore we can't really consider ourselves at all as something separate or above nature, as nature has just shown us. So humanity now will have to, either voluntarily or by force, come to an adaptation which includes living according to the laws of nature. And the way for us to do that in human society is also going to be necessary. And if we don't do that, our next phase of development will be harsher punishments by nature. I mean, this coronavirus isn't that big of a punishment, really, if you think about all the historical disasters humanity has gone through, where millions and millions of people have died before. It's really a drop in the ocean if you think about it, but it has a great potential to do harm, and it can go beyond what it has already done, simply because we are not in tune with nature. So by studying this article, what we want to do is understand how human society needs to arrange itself according to the laws of nature, and what human society should look like in order for us to come to a balanced state with nature itself. So here we are going to study once again, and we're going to continue with where we left off. Good and bad are evaluated by the actions of the individual towards society. Now, if you have questions, as usual, please feel free to send them through, and I'm just going to put the article here in front of me, and I will try to answer those questions as best I can according to the article. So if I'm not mistaken, we are at good and bad are evaluated by the actions of the individual towards society. Am I correct? Yes. Okay, great. So now we can start reading the article. If you like, we'll also do a little introduction. Now, before we got here, Bal Islam was talking about how humanity needs to take control of its development in its proper form, rather than its egoistic form, rather than the way we're currently developing egotistically. Bal Islam says, listen, we need to change this approach to life, and we have to make sure we're in balance with nature, because nature has a goal. There's a purpose to creation. We're not just created for nothing. So the whole of creation, call it nature, call it God, call it Allah, doesn't matter what you call it, a force has taken the time to create the whole of creation. And if you look at the whole of creation, it's rather detailed. It works really perfectly, from the smallest planktons in the ocean to the largest whale, the largest creatures on earth. Everything is connected to each other. So if you don't have those smallest planktons in the ocean, no fish can survive. So even though they're the smallest part in creation, it shows us that there could be no other life in the oceans if they disappear. So from that perspective, Al-Islam is saying if we don't change the way we live and if we don't take charge of our development and become higher levels of a higher level of humanity rather than this low level of egoistic life forms roaming around on the planet and just living and dying for pretty much nothing, he says we have to take the control of development into our hands. If we do, we will have a good life and we will develop towards the purpose of life in a meaningful way, in an understanding, in a nice, nice, smooth way of development. And if we don't, nature will punish us like it's doing now, the coronavirus, and these punishments or these judgments, as they call it, will get harsher and harsher. So until here, this is what he basically explained to us. And he also said, one way or another, humanity will have to get to the purpose of its creation, either the good way or the hard way. So we definitely don't want to make this hard on ourselves, because it could be quite horrific. So we want to study and want to learn what Baal Islam is telling us and how we can organize ourselves so that we can adapt ourselves as a society, as a community that will flow with the laws of nature. So good and bad are evaluated by the actions of the individual towards society. Before we examine the correction of evil in the human species, we must first determine the value of those abstract terms good and bad. When we define an act or an attribute as good or bad, we should clarify whom that attribute or act benefits. To understand that, we must thoroughly know the proportional value between the individual and the collective, that the individual lives in and nourishes from in both matter and in spirit. So first of all, we have to define what really is good and bad, and we can only define it according to what we measure it against. So if we are a human being living in society, we have to see how our relationship between I and the society are interconnected. And according to that interconnectedness, I can then measure whether my action is good or bad for society. So without one or the other, there's nothing to talk about. So defining good and bad needs to be evaluated when it corresponds to two states, the state of the individual and the state of society and our connection between us. And the reason for that is, he's saying, because the individual is constantly feeding itself from the society. Whether we're getting fed corporeally, excuse me, or spiritually. Everything we take from the society. So what I take and what I give can only be measured within that relationship of me, my relationship, and towards the society. Reality shows us that there is no right to exist for an isolated individual without a sufficient number of people around him to serve him and help him provide for his needs. Hence, a person is born to lead a social life to begin with, and each and every individual in society is like a wheel that is linked to several other wheels, placed in a machine. And this single wheel has no freedom of movement in and of itself, but continues with the motion of the rest of the wheels in a certain direction to qualify the machine to perform its general role. So all of us in society have to live in society. This is why we're born in a society. A baby cannot take care of itself. Parents have to look after them. The parents actually also need help from relatives, from grandparents to take care of the children as well. This is actually a full network of interconnectedness between humans to take care of humans. So our needs, our essential needs for survival, is really dependent on those that are around us. So society is necessary for everyone to grow in and to live in nicely, properly, in a good, happy way. And if there is some breakdown in the wheel, the breakdown is not evaluated relating to the wheel itself, but according to its service and role with respect to the whole machine. So each of us are a part of that machine called society. And if one of us causes harm to society, we have to look at it from not that individual's perspective, but how the individual actually impacted society and caused harm. So we can only measure it according to the result that's exposed to us, that's visible to us in society. And in our subject, the benefit of each and every person within his collective is evaluated not according to his own goodness, but according to his service to the public, and vice versa. We appreciate the attribute of evil of each and every individual only according to the harm one inflicts upon the public in general, and not by one's own individual value. So for example, a person can have evil in him, but as long as that evil is not influencing, or it's not impacting society, there's nothing really to worry about. I can only measure the evil in a person if the evil is exposed and we see that that person is causing harm to society. So as long as a person is good or bad, and whether these attributes have no, if they have no effect on society, there's nothing to talk about. We can only measure everything according to the trait, the person, the trait that he has, and how that has affected or impacted society. So all of the good and the bad can only be evaluated according to the person's position in society and the causes that he actually, the causes that he brought upon society with the use of those traits. These things are crystal clear both from the perspective of the truth in them and from the perspective of the good in them. This is because what is found in the collective is only what is found in the individual. And the benefit of the collective is the benefit of each and every individual. Who harms the collective takes his share in the harm, and who benefits the collective takes his share in the benefit. Since individuals are part of the whole, and the whole is not worth in any way more than the sum of the individuals, or of its individuals. So here, once again, this is really important for us to understand. A person's contribution to society makes up what the society is going through. So all of us are contributing to society. So if I benefit the society, then the benefit of the society comes back to me as a benefit. If I harm society, then the harm of the society comes back to me and does harm to me. Why? Because we're all living in that society, and once we're living in a society, there's really nothing more we can do other than contribute to it in a good or a bad way, and according to that we get feedback. And all of the individuals added together, summed up together, the total of us all together is the society. So accordingly, all of us impact the society in a good or a bad way, and according to that good or bad way that we influence the society, we get good or bad feedback. This is how it's working out, and this we can see more and more clearly every day in the world as well now. If one country does something bad, like, it affects everyone. If there's a problem in one part of the world, everybody's affected. Let's say there's an earthquake in Japan with the where the nuclear reactor was, and in Europe we were getting rain with radiation. So same with Chernobyl years ago. So there was a big disaster at the Chernobyl nuclear facility, and after that we got a lot of rain that included that had radiation, which affected the crops, affected all kinds of things, animals and humans. So everything, whatever, no matter what happens around the world, it could be really far, it could be really close, it doesn't really matter. Everything is connected, everything impacts everything. Just like those little planktons in the ocean, without them, no fish can survive. So the same thing really works for society. All of us are the same little planktons in society, and when we come together, it's like the whole ocean comes together, so the whole of humanity also comes together. We're all that interconnected. And now it wasn't so visible to humanity before, but anybody who actually observes nature can understand that we're dependent on nature, because we feed ourselves from crops. So the welfare of the soil, the welfare of the climate, the welfare of the forests, they all need to be taken care of. We can't abuse them. We can't, use them thoughtlessly and, sucking nature's blood. We just can't. Otherwise, we're not going to have any food. We're not going to have a planet to live on. So nature is now beginning to squeeze all of us with the coronavirus. And this is actually a sign for us, which goes even beyond what Bala Salam is talking about in the article. He's saying, well, listen, you guys are all in one society, are interconnected, but don't forget, you're also part of nature and you're also connected to that. So if you start going off track, I'm going to have to put you back on track, and that's not going to be quite nice. So on the one hand, nature is squeezing us to come to this understanding that we as humanity need to sort out how we live. So Bala Islam is explaining that only by this balanced attribute of everyone towards society can we have a balanced life in accordance with nature. So doing good and bad to society ultimately comes back to the individual. It thus turns out that the collective and the individual are one and the same, just like that plankton. So one plankton is the same as that great whale in the ocean. And the individual is not harmed because of his enslavement to the collective, since the freedom of the collective and the freedom of the individual are one and the same. And as they share the good, they also share the freedom. Thus, good attributes and bad attributes, good deeds and bad deeds are evaluated only according to the benefit of the public. Of course, the above words apply if all the individuals perform their role towards the public to the fullest and receive no more than they deserve and take no more than their friends share. But if a part of the collective does not behave accordingly, it turns out that not only do they harm the collective, but they are also harmed. So that's very important to understand. Let's read that again. Of course, the above words apply if all the individuals perform their role towards the public to the fullest and receive no more than they deserve and take no more than their friends share. So everybody in society ultimately has to take according to their needs for survival and not more. Because if I'm taking more and more than what I need, if my greed is more active and I'm getting greedy and I want to be on top of everyone, then I'm stealing from somebody else. So no wonder 60-70% of the planet is hungry, on the verge of hunger and starvation. No wonder we have so many homeless people. No wonder we have so many sick people. No wonder we have lack of education, health, clean water, food. It's not that the world doesn't have enough. The world has enough to feed everyone, but it doesn't have enough to feed the greed of everyone. So if all of us take according to what we need, then the whole world will have everything it needs. And actually, by that token, nobody will feel like they have less. Nobody will feel like they're deficient in any way. Simply because animals also take according to their needs. You don't see a lion going and killing 2 zebras. They just go and hunt one. They share it because that's enough for them. They understand that this is what they need. So animals do that on an instinctive level. This is how they live, by their nature. But humans are run by the software of egoism. So this egoism is now dominating us. And we have to, as consciously as we can, come to the awareness of this egoism. And we have to understand that we cannot carry on living this way. It's just not feasible. We're killing our own planet. And thus we're killing ourselves while doing it. So in society, everyone in society can be looked after really well, actually. And all they have to do is to work according to what they can provide for society and take what they need from society. And every society actually has the ability to give that to its citizens. And if they can't do that, it's sheer because of corruption. That's all. I don't think there's any country in the world that has the ability to provide food, shelter, and a decent life, a minimum decent life at least, to any of its people. The reason they can't do it is because they won't do it. And this is, like I said, sheer egoism and sheer corruption of individuals who control the public, who run the governments. So all of us need to understand that we need to take just what we need, just like a balanced person should. But if a part of the collective does not behave accordingly, it turns out that not only do they harm the collective, but they are also harmed. So in any society, if a group of people are taking more than what they need, they're harming the whole society, and this will in return come back to them in a harsh way. So this whole thing is, it's a circle. You can't get out of it, and it's cause and consequence. So all of us are integrated into one system. So if one of us is, dysfunctional, definitely that person is going to be getting it, just like the whole of society gets it as well. So there is no escape, or there is no actually way for us to say, well, I'm free from all those things despite the fact that I'm taking more than what I need. I might be taking more and more than everybody else, but I'll be better off. So society comes back in a way where it includes everyone, and sooner or later it'll affect everyone as well. So this process of taking more and more and more does not work anymore. It won't work. The whole of humanity, including nature, is now taking a new form of existence. And we can see from the things that are happening in the world that things cannot go as they were before. So from now on, the whole of society will have to change, and it will have to change according to this law, that everyone will take what they need and they will provide the rest for society. We should not discuss further something that is known to all, and the aforesaid is only to show the drawback, the place that needs correction. And that is that each and every individual will understand that his own benefit and the benefit of the collective are one and same thing. In that, the world will come to its full correction. So as soon as we understand that my benefit and society's benefit are the same thing, then that's it. All of us will be considerate, and all of us will have a really balanced approach to life. And this is how humanity will have to get corrected sooner or later. One way or another, we will have to get to this. And despite the fact that humanity doesn't want to face it, doesn't mean we're going to avoid it. Certainly not. One way or another, nature or life, call it life, nature, doesn't matter, will put us in shape. It will bring us to the form that we need to live by. And if we do it voluntarily, great. If we don't, think of another virus, think of another natural disaster. Think about all those natural disasters we had before this virus. Australia was burning, Siberia was burning, California was burning, the east coast of the US was constantly floods, storms, all over the world, tsunamis. So there is no real escape for humanity at all. We're stuck on this planet, and nobody's going to Mars right now. And even if you went to Mars, what do you think is going to happen? If we're egoists, sucking the planet dry, what do you think is going to happen in a few months when we get to Mars? We're going to suck that place dry as well. Not to mention there's nothing to live for over there. It's just dry sand. So this whole concept of the individual, the society, and being part of nature, being part of creation, needs to be understood by all of us. That if we're out of sync with laws of nature, we are going to pay a price for it, like we're paying now. Now, if we don't arrange ourselves in a more balanced way, pursuant to the crises that we're going through with the coronavirus, then we'll get another virus which will be harsher, and that will teach us a harsher lesson. So everything, it's like raising a child. You tell the child once nicely, the second time you raise your voice a little bit, and the third time you start shouting. Why? Because the kid doesn't understand. You said it nicely a few times. If they don't understand, you have to put them in place. Otherwise, they're going to cause harm for themselves, and they're going to cause harm to others around them. And this is how nature is behaving with us as well. So let's see what we have here. We've got a few questions. Now that we've finished the subtitle, let's answer these if we can. Francesco's asking, when governments don't help citizens with reforms for jobs and salaries, the poor actually approve organized crime for help. Who's the good guy or the bad guy at the point for the society? At that point for the society? Well, look, whether it's, government is no different than organized crime, if you ask me. Government is organized crime. They do everything legally, and everybody at the top is stealing everything. So it's, governments right nowadays in the 21st century is the biggest organized crime there is. If you look at it, if you think about it, all the lobbies that work to pay politicians to get laws passed that favor them. Think about it. So all those politicians in the hand of the lobbyists, those big corporations and so forth, they're all organized crime, really. Okay, they're just doing it legally, but doing it legally doesn't mean it's not organized crime. So at the end of the day, we have to understand that because everybody is a part of society, everybody gets hit. And this is why the coronavirus is such a great example, because it kills everyone. Whether you're a politician, whether you're a, Hollywood movie star, whether you're somebody who's just a simple citizen, everybody dies from it. So we begin to understand from this change in life that the new system that's working in life is going to hit everyone. So whether the governments are corrupt or not doesn't really matter at this point. What matters is that we need to, as those who study the wisdom of Kabbalah and who study laws of nature, who study laws of human nature, and who want to make that positive change internally, we need to, as individuals, start to make that work for ourselves. We need to start changing ourselves through the study, through the work that we do, so that we can go through that inner transformation. And because from the perception of reality we understand that everything is perceived inside a person, our change for the better will actually bring a better perception of reality, but more corrected perception of reality to us. So as we change, the world around us will change accordingly. This is why it's very important for a student of Kabbalah to focus on changing him or herself. Okay, so we can't really do anything with those corrupt, governments or organized crime. They're all the same. But what we can do is endeavor to raise ourselves to a higher level of consciousness, and accordingly from there on we can move forward. P. Green is asking, our instructors have said Kabbalists only write about spirituality. Is there a way to always know how to apply their teachings to corporal reality? Yeah, there is a way to know, but for that you have to attain spirituality. And I'll tell you why. That's a really nice question. If you think about it, we at the human level are at the top of the pyramid. So below us there's the animate, the vegetative, and the still level of creation. Now as humans, we understand how the animate level works, how our biology works, how animals work. We can understand those things. Why? Because they're lower than us. We can understand the vegetative level through the science of botany, how plants grow, how they multiply, how they function. We can understand them. And through other sciences like physics, chemistry, we understand the still level. However, though, at the human level, we have a big problem trying to understand ourselves. In fact, at the human level, we don't understand ourselves. And we come up with all these psychological theories, or the science, as they call it, a psychology, or psychology is not a science at all. Why it cannot be a psychology? Simply because all of us are different. So no matter how many psychoanalysis you're doing, or how many psychological experiments you're doing, you need to understand that every person's understanding of a state, the sensation of a state, the feeling of a state is different, simply because we're all different. So you can't use psychology also to understand human nature, because we all have different traits in us, or different combinations of traits. So in order to understand ourselves, we have to go one level up, and that's called spirituality. And this is why the wisdom of Kabbalah talks about, focuses on raising the person to a spiritual level, because from that spiritual level you can begin to understand how to live in corporeality. And this is why Baal Islam is touching on this concept here. Well, he's saying if we look at nature, we understand this is how they live, but we don't live according to what laws of nature say. So what we have to do is arrange ourselves accordingly. How does he see that? Well, he sees that because he's at a higher level. So he's from that higher level telling us how we should arrange ourselves to avoid suffering, to live in a much better, in a more balanced, happy way of life. So in order for us to understand ourselves as humans, we need to go up spiritually, and then we can understand exactly what's going on, because there we attain the roots. As you know from the roots and branches lesson, we need to attain the roots if we want to understand the branches, which are this world. The events of this world are called the branches. Francesco is asking, my dogs will kill each other with greed if I don't give them both a bone. Yet one dog wants both bones and will steal it from the other, thus wants more than one. Do animals sometimes behave as humans? If they stick around us, they certainly will. If they stick around us, they certainly will. In the animal kingdom as well, there's an order to everything. So, for example, when the lions hunt, the lion, the alpha male, let's call it, the head of the herd, he gets to eat the organs first, the heart and the liver and so on. And the other ones, the less, start eating the meat and the bones and the other parts. So there's a hierarchy in the animal kingdom as well. And that hierarchy needs to be maintained. And the reason they maintain it is so that they can secure the future generation. This is why in nature the strongest ones survive. Why? Because they have to continue the next generation. Francesco is asking, will we die before we become Kabbalists? Well, if we don't put our backbone into it, we certainly might. So we don't know. Okay, we don't know how that works out. Why? Because we don't know if we're going to die today, tomorrow, or in 10 years or 20 years. We don't know. And because we don't know, it's actually a good motivation to do our best every day and never to leave today's work for tomorrow, because you never know if you're going to be around tomorrow. So hopefully we'll study, work hard, and we can be Kabbalists in some, in a short amount of time. It all depends on a person's effort. P. Green is asking, Kabbalah teaches necessities are neither praised nor condemned. If a person requires a gadget that to us appears to provide no purpose, should we consider that as a necessity for that person? The way we can't judge it for other people. I'll tell you why. You'll start acting like a police officer to everyone. What needs to happen here is the individual has to go through a conscious development. And that individual needs to decide through that development what is necessity and what isn't. If we now start going around telling people what they need and what they don't need, it's going to look like this, it's going to look like that Russian communism that they started applying with the KGB. They terrorized people to live in a certain way. But the wisdom of Kabbalah doesn't say that. The wisdom of Kabbalah says a person has to, develop consciously. A person has to develop through understanding of one's nature and the laws of nature, and through that understanding, make decisions and choices without coercion. Because if you coerce a person, then basically what you're doing is you're just torturing them. But if you educate a person, if they understand how the laws of nature works, how human nature works, how these need to be balanced out in order for us to have a good life, then that's a different ball game. That's conscious development, and the person can decide, everything through that conscious development, and that will actually be the right decision for that person, because nobody can really decide for an individual like the individual himself. So we need to be really cautious about about infringing or violating an individual's freedom. That's really important, because otherwise you're not giving them room to develop. You're not giving them room to understand, to freely develop and come to a conscious level by their own efforts. It becomes pressure. Melike Chichek is asking, what will happen to the light we attracted through the studies we have done so far? Let me read it again. What will happen to the light we attracted through the studies we have done so far? Be good enough if we die. E.g. from a virus. How can one know what is enough? Okay, what will happen to us what will happen to us and the light that we attracted through the study if we die beforehand? Well, that's a good question. Well, in life, that nothing dies, actually. Death is only perceived in our corporeal life, because corporeality is really not even a part of the created reality. Corporeality is seemingly life and death for us, but it's not real life, because it's an education ground. It's like a playground for kids, right? Maybe you've been to kindergarten. You've been to kindergarten? All right, it's for that kid, it's like life. Okay, but for grown-ups, we understand that they're just playing around there, and they need to play there because through the games they develop. So this world, or the perception of this world from the perspective of reality, is a playing ground where a person can develop, where a person can grow. So in that state, there's really no life and death, and we really need to, as we study the wisdom of Kabbalah, we need to start looking at ourselves, simply start to at least think about the concept of looking at reality outside of the body, because at the end of the day, body is like a shirt. It gets old and you throw it away. Okay, it gets old, it gets ripped, you can't wear it anymore, you throw it away, and the body is the same thing, really. But the body, or the shirt, when you throw it away, doesn't really, it doesn't really kill your essence. So when you want to talk about life and death, we have to start talking about a greater perspective at looking at things, if you know what I mean. So everything we do in order to attract the light and in order to benefit our conscious development is having a positive impact on humanity. That positive impact means raising the consciousness of humanity. So as we raise the consciousness of humanity, we actually, what we're doing is, like in this article here, we're benefiting the society. So just like people were studying before you guys came, so through their study, you started waking up, you started talking, you started thinking about, well, what's the meaning of my life? Why am I living? Now we've got the coronavirus, our life is all locked down. Even though we have everything, we can't do the things we want. So life has begun to restrict the whole of humanity, right? So what's it doing really? It's educating us, isn't it? So this is what the wisdom of Kabbalah does. So as we educate ourselves more and more, we increase that high level of consciousness, and this consciousness does not disappear. Our bodies may disappear, but we really, in essence, we don't. Because our body is not us. If it was us, it would not die. It's not us, it's just a clothing. It's just, the body is like a perception tool. You know, a tool for perceiving things, like, you know, sometimes you need a microscope to see things in detail, or, you know, to see things that the blind eye can't see. So our body is kind of like that. It depicts to us a reality which we can study in order to understand the real us, and to build out of that a new conscious, a higher level of, you know, existence. And that existence is what we need to do. So if you're talking about life and death, well, you know, in spirituality there is no death. But what we have to do, is, because we need the body to depict, not to depict, but to understand, to study this reality, and to learn and to raise ourselves from this reality to a higher one, we need the body. So that need makes it a necessity for us to use it in a positive way. If our body dies in the process, what happens to us is what you might be asking. Just like our cells die off, but the body remains, and new cells are born in the body every day, new people are born every day, but they're all part of the body. So nobody is really disappearing, nobody is, you know, dying off and you know, completely getting wiped out, or being made redundant. There is nothing redundant in nature, including all of us. So this phase it's a bit tricky to explain. The only way we can really relate to it is when a person attains spirituality. Why? Because then that person understands that you live in a body, but also you can live in another kind of form, which is called the soul, and you can actually exist, perceive reality, and live in that form as well. And just like we don't care about our shirt, once it gets old, we throw it in the bin. A Kabbalist then doesn't really, worry about its body dying off. Why? Because it's in this existence called the form of the soul. So the most important thing for all of us should be, in the world actually, should be to attain that soul. So don't die off just yet. We've got work to do. Okay. Francesco's asking, you mentioned in the last session, God knows what you're doing in the letters, names of God. So let me see. You mentioned in the last session, God knows what you're doing with the letters, names of God. Is that not taught in Kabbalah B'nai Baruch? There's a lot of info on YouTube on that topic. God knows what you are doing with the letters or names of God. Look, letters and the names of God are special situations where a person feels a connection with the Creator. The name of God or name of the Creator, there are many names to the Creator. Okay? All of those names are describing a state, a sensation between the individual and the Creator. That's what the name of God means. That I am in a certain state where I feel the Creator as that word. So, the names of the Creator is just not simple names we talk about. There's nothing really to talk about there. This is why in Kabbalah we use the word the Creator. Why? Well, because it's a generic term for a force that created everything. Are there many names to it? Yeah, but they're all talking about certain levels in spirituality where the person feels the relationship of the Creator to the individual in a certain state, and then the Kabbalist gives that a name, and that's called the name of God. Just like we give I don't know, for example, a name too tasty, right? Let's say chocolate is sweet. Okay, so we understand that the word sweet is something nice. So they have a word for the Creator at a certain state, and so on. This is the way to describe the Creator, just like we describe sensations in our day-to-day lives, according to the taste we get. So the names of God, the names of the Creator, all these things are very, exalted levels in spirituality where you can actually give that relationship a certain topic. You can say, well, our relationship is warm or cold, it's light or dark. All these things are all related to that relationship between the individual and the created being. Well, we have got a lot of questions today. Francesco is asking, isn't our playground working with the 10? I'm understanding that our playground is everyday life to change society. Well, for us, our playground is the group. You're right. So if you have a 10, that's great. And within the 10, we're working on that connection, and that's our playground. You're absolutely correct. If a person doesn't have a 10, our group right now, as we study here, this is our playground. As we study the materials, as we want to understand how to give direction to our life and how to develop spiritually with the friends that are here with us right now. So it doesn't matter. Every time you're studying spirituality, you can make that a playground for yourself for development. Obviously, if you've got a 10, then you can take it beyond the lectures and start doing that work within the 10, within the group, and that's great, and that's also good to do. Obviously, that's going to speed you up. Eugene is asking, will we see our loved ones who have died again, like religion teaches? Well, it's a tricky questions you've got. All of us are a part of one soul. And there was only one soul that was created, Adam Harishon. And all of us are a part of that soul. And if you think of it that way, all of humanity is our loved ones. And the way we see things differently right now because of our loved ones, I mean, they could be your parents, your spouse, your partner, and all these, close relatives to you. At the moment, they appear to be loved ones to us. And in our earthly way of existence, you're right. Okay? But from a spiritual perspective, all of humanity is one family. All of humanity is one soul. Just like we have a lot of organs in our body, we've got lungs, heart, liver, kidneys, all these cells, tendons, bones, muscles, all our organs of perception. We have thousands and millions of parts in our bodies that are all interconnected and related, and all of them come together and they make one body. So I can't really say to myself, I don't love my hand, or I don't love my, ears or something. We're all part of one body. So if you look at the whole of reality from that perspective, you'll get a better understanding of what Kabbalists are talking about when they say, I wish the whole of humanity was one body so I could hug them all. Why? Because this is how they feel. They don't feel like somebody is less close or far compared to somebody else. As a person elevates himself in spirituality, he begins to see the whole of humanity as parts of himself, as part of his soul. So he can't really say this is close and this is far. In spirituality, everybody's close, everybody's very important. Okay, great. So now we can move on to the next topic. The 4 attributes: mercy, truth, justice, and peace in the individual and the collective. Once we know full well the desired attribute of goodness, we should examine the things and the means at our disposal in order to hasten that delight and happiness. 4 properties are provided for that purpose: mercy, truth, justice, and peace. Those attributes have been used by all world reformers thus far. It is more correct to say that it is with those four attributes that human development has advanced thus far through the government of heaven in a gradual path until it brought humankind to its current state. It has already been written that it would be better for us to take the law of development under our own hands and government, for then we will rid ourselves of any torment that the developmental history has in store for us from this day forth. Thus we should scrutinize and examine those four properties in order to thoroughly understand that we have been given thus far, and by them we will know what aid we should hope to get from them in the future. So here he wants to make a little introduction to us with the attributes of mercy, truth, justice, and peace, because we as humanity use these attributes to make our lives better, to progress in life. However, the way we've used them has brought us to this current state, which is not very good, is it? So Baal Islam wants to really open these up a little bit for us, and he wants to explain what they actually mean, and how humanity is, using it incorrectly. So he'll give us he's given us an introduction. He'll open these up one by one, and he's just touching on the note that the best way to do things is for the individual to take control of its development and to understand these properties, these four properties, and to use them correctly for self-development. So I'm just wondering if we're going to have enough time for all of this, because this one's quite long. So let's do this. Practical difficulties in determining the truth. Okay, this is where we're going to stop. So if you can make a note on that, Burchin. Okay. Let's see if we've got any more. So if you guys got questions, let's have a few more questions, because we only have 8 minutes left. So I don't want to start something which we have to leave right in the middle of. So let me see if there are any questions here. Francesco's asking again, can you speak a bit about reincarnation and past experiences we bring forward from our past to the present, like you said, to connect gut feeling with understanding? Well, look, reincarnation is a hot topic in many spiritual teachings, also in some religions as well. We have to start, well, if we're going to start study the wisdom of Kabbalah, we have to start looking at it from the perspective of a Kabbalist. Now, spirituality means I attain the attribute of the Creator, and I live and exist in His reality. If I have not attained spirituality, and if I'm not like the Creator, then there is no spirituality. I am born, I live a life here, and I die. When a person dies, that person as an individual doesn't come back in another body after he dies, because otherwise, as you can imagine, otherwise the population would be stable. We wouldn't have 8 billion people. Okay? Why do we have more and more population? And also we can have less people. If we have less people, what then of this concept of reincarnation? So reincarnation is not a body count. We're not counting heads here. Reincarnation means that I am changing my state. So from a current state, I'm going to a new state. And when we take a look at reincarnation, we have to start looking at it not from my individual perspective, but from the reincarnation of the whole. And that whole is the soul of Adam Arishon. There's only one soul. Okay, remember? And we're all parts of it. So what's really going through that transformation is that one soul. And anybody who attains spirituality is also going through the transformations. But for a Kabbalist, a reincarnation happens all the time. It's not whether your body is dying or not. Because reincarnation means I'm giving birth to a new state. And that state is a spiritual state. So that's what real reincarnation is. If we were to think of reincarnation as, for example, a person died today and then got reincarnated in a body, I don't know, next week or in, I don't know, 2 months or whatever, then, you know, we'd just have a fixed number of people. So somebody would die and then somebody would be born in his place. And that'd be it. But the soul doesn't work like that, because the soul has many, many parts to it. Also in this world, a person can, for example, God forbid, lose an organ, right, like a limb or whatever, but the body is still alive. Okay, so he's got one hand instead of two, but the body is still alive. So we have to understand that reincarnation, it just, the whole system is a complete system, and it is beyond the individual. And we have to start thinking beyond the boundaries of the individual when we're talking about reincarnation. Okay, we have to start looking at it from a spiritual development perspective, because our corporeal development isn't really, you know, all these people being born and dying. It really doesn't have that much of a benefit if that person hasn't really elevated him or herself with respect to how it was born. So imagine all those people who are born and who do not partake or participate in self-development towards their soul at all. Well, what use was that? Really, it's like pretty much, you know, it's like you're born and you do nothing, you did nothing, and you died. So we can't really measure it from a corporeal point of view. There's nothing to really talk about. From the wisdom of from the point of the wisdom of Kabbalah, we have to look at it as a spiritual development that occurs in an individual who's at an already spiritual state. And all those other people who haven't reached spirituality, who are dying, and new people being born and so forth, is the system actually developing. It's the system that's developing it. So we can't really say, you know, talk about reincarnation like other spiritual methods and so forth. It just doesn't make sense either. P. Greensthorpe is asking, if creation started after Adam was expelled from the Garden of Eden, how does this reconcile with science? Well, if you're talking about, I don't know, which part, where are you talking about Adam from Eden or from heaven? Garden of Eden. Adam being expelled from the Garden of Eden is describing to us the process of creation. Science, the wisdom of Kabbalah, is called a science because the person is taking the position of a researcher and is researching his nature, the laws of nature, and his state in creation. That's called science. So who's the scientist? The person who's studying himself in creation is the scientist. This is why the wisdom of Kabbalah is called a science. I am the scientist who's studying my life within this reality and drawing conclusions according to the truth that I see and I live. So the story of Adam in the Garden of Eden, it looks like a romantic or a fairy tale little story. However, this fairy tale is actually the point where he's developing his egoism. And that egoism, because it's beginning to develop now, is the point where he begins to disconnect from the Creator. So heaven means I have a connection with the Creator, and being expelled means due to my increase in self-love or egoism, I disconnect from the Creator. Disconnect from the Creator means I've lost my love for the Creator, or I've lost my equivalence of form with the Creator. That's what it means. You know, they depict it in nice fairy tale stories, like a, you know, it's really nice, like a little, you know, Hollywood story or whatever, but it's really talking about the relationship between the Creator and the created being. So Adam being expelled from the Garden of Eden doesn't mean that he was in some, you know, I don't know, some luscious garden where everything was happening and going according to his way. But he had a strong connection with the Creator, and his increase in egoism, his increase in self-love, was now beginning to abuse that love relationship, and so they got disconnected. And that's what it means to be expelled from the Garden of Eden. So it's not like, person or God, it's not like God's kicking you out. It's a state where you begin to change for the worse, and due to that, your relationship suffers. Same thing in our reality as well. When somebody is abusive to us or is unfair to us in our relationship, we don't stand for it. What do? We expel them. We say goodbye to them. And this is the same thing. So being in the Garden of Eden means I'm connected, I have a connection with the Creator. It means I am like the Creator. And being expelled from it means I'm no longer like Him, so I've got nothing to do with Him. Just like in our corporeal relationships. Pretty similar. If somebody isn't treating us right, well, we say, sorry, we can't be together. Why? Because you're just not right. So think of it that way. As we go forward in spirituality, as we advance in spirituality, these things will become more clear for us. But we have to start looking at things from the perspective of an observer to reality. I want to observe myself within reality, seemingly like from an outside perspective. So it's like me, and from outside of me, I want to see how I work, how I exist, how life is influencing me, how I'm influencing, how this movement between me and life, this relationship between me and life is occurring, and then I'm beginning to observe it, and more importantly, from the observation, what I want to do is draw conclusions, and that's how it becomes scientific. That's how I begin to understand my nature. That's how I begin to understand myself. And through understanding myself, I can then begin to want to change. Why? Because through the understanding of my nature, I can begin to see what's harming me, what kind of harm I'm causing myself, what's destructive, what's self-destructive to me. And those things I will want to change voluntarily. So this is why conscious development of humanity is very important. And this is why studying the wisdom of Kabbalah is very important to any person who wants to understand themselves, their nature, and why they're suffering in life. Great, nice questions along the way. So it's 10 o'clock, dear friends. Once again, we've come to the end of our lesson. Hopefully next week we'll continue, and we'll carry on with this article. It's a very important article. You can find it on the website, and feel free to read through it as well. It'll be easy for us to go through it next week. In the interim though, have a great evening or a great day. All the best. Take care. Bye now.